Hi, you're listening to Mediation Station, and this is your host, Greg Fenton. Each week we explore topics and ideas related to the experience of people with conflict and look to promote the profession of conflict resolvers. We are available to connect with at GREGGF at primus.ca. Listen to podcasts of Mediation Station on SoundCloud or Apple Podcasts, and also now on Google Podcasts. Please follow us at our Twitter account at Fenton Mediation. Our topic for conversation today is called Zooming and More, a potpourri of adventures and misadventures with Brad Heckman. Joining for conversation, and that Laura Tarcea is with me as the co-host. And also hanging around in the background there is the radio elf, Joan Cass. So the rules of engagement. We are continuing with presenting the program live each Sunday night from 8 to 9 p.m. through Zoom due to the radio station CHHA 1610 AM needing to adhere to COVID-19 emergency measures here in Ontario. So there's no live in-person programming. We will engage in conversation with everyone attending, able to listen and watch the conversation. Microphones and webcams will be closed. And if anyone wants to contribute anything, there are two options. One is to see the chat icon as a bubble at the bottom center of your screen for you to click to then type in a comment or question and click to send. That will be shared out loud as part of the conversation. Or you can click on the reactions icon that is also located on the bottom center of your screen for us to see. Click on the hand icon within that for us to see that you want to speak, and we will then open your microphone for you to speak, though not your camera, for you to comment or question, and we will engage that in the conversation too. So the show is being recorded for both video and audio purposes. That will be uploaded for public access on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts to listen. So also the videos, which are right up to date, are all uploaded for the kind effort of Laura and Anthony on the my YouTube channel, Fenton Mediation. So today we're talking about Zooming and more, a potpourri of adventures and misadventures. Joining me for the first time, live and visually, because you've been live and not in person, is Brad Heckman. How are you?
How am I? I'm doing well. Earlier about that question, how is so hard to answer nowadays, and I had yet to come up with my elevator pitch answer of how you doing. But so I'll say I'm doing well. I'm thrilled to be here. I have to say I don't know a lot, but when people come to me and say, Brad, do you know of a Spanish language radio show in Canada that has a mediation themed show in English? I'm able to say, it's so funny you should ask me that, because I know exactly this particular one.
Where is that? Oh my gosh. I really appreciate you. You've been part of the program for a few years now. We initially met, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. You came up to Toronto. You attended a particular family mediation focused conference. You were the keynote speaker, and you made a lasting impression on me, in addition to other people. So I've had you on as a periodic visitor, as I call people, and we always come up with interesting conversations, as I believe tonight will be.
We shall see. As I said, I think I've used up most of my good material, so I'm striving for mediocre, but I will say I remember the exact date that all of us on camera right now met, Laura, Joni. It was inauguration day, the inauguration of the then American president. May his name be erased. And I remember just being so happy to be in Canada at that moment, and so grateful to all the offers to either hide me for 4 years or marry me off to a Canadian. And by the way, are those offers still standing?
Sure.
Excellent. All right, let's
You might even get more than you bargained for. So what's it been like for you over the past year? Because it's almost, for us here, a year of transitioning with COVID-19 and becoming institutionalized in some way within our own spaces.
What's it been like? I mean, it's been fascinating. I remember early in the pandemic, like a week into it, we were already making jokes as if we'd been under siege for years at that point. And I remember like reading some advice thing somewhere on the internet saying, "Here's what you got to do when you're on lockdown and quarantine. Even if you're not going out anywhere, make your bed, shower every day, don't sleep during the day, establish a routine." And like, I'm thinking, what are you, crazy? Like, those are literally the best things about this damn quarantine. Don't got to do any of that stuff, and I can sleep during the day. Now I've come to realize that routinizing things has been somewhat helpful to my mental and physical health, such that they are. So I find for myself, it's been a combination of doing a lot and doing nothing, and looking at time in a very, very different way. The pace of the day is very different. Somewhere between like life as I imagine in the Mediterranean, where you just kind of let the day go by, and being in solitary confinement. So somewhere in that continuum.
Have you been able to count all the books on your shelves?
Yes, yeah. I've looked at the pictures in most of them.
Yeah, well, I'm a picture person too, who reads words. So what have you noticed then about yourself that has provided the most affect on your life over the course of the past year? And whatever that means to you.
Yeah, I'm among the people who I've been well designed for this kind of thing. I'm an introvert by nature, so it's been easy. So like not having to find excuses to cancel social plans has been like, that's been one of the great benefits. And yeah, I've always wanted to serve and have some sense of purpose, whether running a nonprofit or mediating or teaching. And so much of that was discontinued or derailed or transformed, it really has been humbling, because I've had to take things that I thought I knew how to do and then insert them into a different medium. And I think Zoom is the topic of the day of our Potpourri, and the thing we're on right now, like that was an adjustment. So I think I taught one of the last in-person classes at NYU before lockdown. So it was literally one day we're in class, the next day we're virtual. So having to become a virtual instructor literally overnight was amazing and hard. It's something that I promised I would never do, unless there was the plague, which
Are we close?
yeah. So I've learned a lot, and it's funny. One of the things that I did, and teaching a mediation course, and I know there are plenty of people who teach mediation online, and I'm sure they do it brilliantly. I'm not one of those people. I had to figure out how to transform kinesthetic and movement-based activities and visual arts and theater exercises into this two-dimensional platform, and figure out, well, how to do role plays, how to talk about eye contact when we don't know if we're making eye contact. I mean, it may look to you like I'm engaged in making eye contact. No, I'm looking exactly at myself right now, which studies show most people do when they're actually on Zoom. So I'll stop talking for now, but I'll be happy to share some of the little tweaks and things that I did to try to make my class, which was 6 hours a day on Zoom, as powerful.
Laura's going to engage with us too, and then the elf will also. Can you just give a quick snippet of your background, your professional background at this point, Brad?
Yeah, sure. I've been involved in mediation and peace building for about 30 years now. Got my start by being an English teacher in Poland in 1989 when the revolution broke out, and I just saw this amazing combination of social protest and civil disobedience, followed by a negotiated roundtable discussion, and that kind of flipped the switch for me on how peace building and civil disobedience can be like years interchanging. And since then, I worked internationally for a number of years, helping set up mediation centers in a number of countries abroad, and then later founded the New York Peace Institute, which is a community mediation center based in Manhattan and Brooklyn. And most recently, I've been a visiting professor at New York University.
And how, Laura, what do you want to say? Come on.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Oh my God.
Greg, the invitation is heartwarming. I actually did want to hear some of the Zoom tips and tricks and strategies, because I do find it well, for me, to be honest, sort of I'm aligned with what you were mentioning earlier, that I would have never seen myself as mediator online, or even enjoy classes online. I would have always opted throughout my university or anywhere. I always opted for in-person, no matter what the sacrifices were, no matter about the parking, the prep lunch, all of that stuff. And now I have to say, I have to confess, I really like it. So I really, really like it. So I'm curious about, how do you find it? Did you find it? Do you like it? It's converted me, which is incredible, that I've never, ever thought that I would have been converted. So here I am, converted.
I think I had a similar trajectory. I can't say I grew to love it, and I wouldn't swap it with the in-person exchange, but it went better than I thought. And some of the things that I did, and I'm very much an analog person. I'm not a techie at all. And what I wanted to do was make it feel as much as an in-person experience as possible. So all of the gizmos and things that Zoom comes with, that Greg so beautifully instructed us on in the beginning, I forbade the students to use them. So they had to be on screen. They had to have their microphones on all the time, barring some emergency situation. And they couldn't use the raise your hand feature. They had to physically raise their hand, and that forced them to be engaged and present and scan the room and keep an eye out. Also, like, I realized that the social contract of it is, that just below screen, they're going to be looking at their phones and accepting like some dimension of that. There you go. Yeah, right.
Look at the perfect student there, Laura.
Yeah. So I had to figure out, like, what were some ways that I can maintain control of the classroom by giving away control. So one of the things that I did was I suggested that rather than me calling on people, I'll call on one student to respond to, let's say, to practice a reflection tactic. And then that person would call on someone else, and that person would call on someone else, and no one knew who was going to be called on next. So it decreased the possibility of people hiding, which is something that's really easy to do in Zoom. One thing that was tricky, though, was according to NYU rules, your video presence was not mandatory. So I had to kind of build an agreement with students, and we had this 5-finger system. So If ever I was unsure if people understood the words that were coming out of my mouth or a concept that I was explaining, I would ask people to show the number of fingers that correspond to their level of understanding. So like no fingers, man, I have no idea what on earth you're talking about. 5 meant, yeah, I'm hip to your jive, and other numbers of fingers meant you're somewhere in between on that. So everything I would do or say, I would do a check-in and say, all right, show me your number of fingers. And then that would allow me to get a sense of, okay, I need to kind of backtrack. Or if someone wouldn't raise their hand, that meant they weren't paying attention. So I got to pick on them for that reason.
What about the one finger thing? Did you sort of specify which finger they could use and relative to which they couldn't?
Well played. Yeah, that would explain a lot of the middle fingers I was getting and tend to get on the reg. Yeah. So the other thing that I did is knowing that I was going to be, Zooming 6 hours a day, and this is for 2 weeks in a row. So these were long days to be in front of a screen that's not, a TV show. I deputized every day a different student. At first I asked if someone could be the break sheriff. So the person who would be responsible for saying, when it's time to propose a break, what should we do during the break, energizer, stretch break, bio break, what it might be. But it would be a different student every day who would be in control of that. And that student also would be in control to check in and kind of see where people's energy level was. Students, they liked the idea. They only said, can we call it break fairy instead of break sheriff? This being at the height of discord between police and civilians. So I realized, sheriff, too soon. So it was great. And then every day one student would deputize another student for that. So it was kind of forcing them to engage and they really had fun with it. And I've said this before, laughing brains are more absorbent, and it kind of gamified the experience a little bit. Those are
how many students would be in attendance usually through one of your teachings?
For this class, I capped it at 8 because I figured that was the maximum number that I could give a meaningful experience to, and I could break up into mediation pods. It was oversubscribed, so I think there were 11 students, and they had to be there at all times. And I had, I think, 2 students who were quarantining in China and 1 student who was in Seattle. So this like really spanned many time zones. I'm not good with numbers, so like I had some people who were there at 6 in the morning, others at like 3 a.m. I'm pretty sure I had 1 student who had just like a still photo of herself for like a good amount of it. Another part of it that was humbling for me, and this wasn't a mediation class, it was more of a public speaking and presentation class, that when we went virtual, like just being in other people's homes, and this is before people figured out how to put the backgrounds up. So the background here, I just Googled New York intellectual, and this is the backdrop that they gave me.
You mean that's not your real place?
Or is it? No, actually, I live in a hollowed out mountaintop in a skull-shaped island. This is just artifice. So like seeing people's homes, seeing their vulnerability as like their partners were around. It felt mildly intrusive on my part, and yet it ended up being just a beautiful moment, because like this was their time to connect with other human beings at a time when we couldn't be in the same in the same room. So, and of course, pets. Got to see people's pets. So anytime a cat would come up to the screen, like that was.
Do you have one? A pet?
Yeah. What do we got there?
That's Fraser. Hi, Fraser.
You have Niles and Fraser, right?
Yeah.
I couldn't see him though.
That's good luck.
Couldn't see him?
No, I
Not
didn't.
not too clearly.
Oh, he's black. He's entirely black, so it's like a big black blob.
I saw a black blob somewhere.
Well, that was her cat. That was Fraser.
I'll take your word. Hi, Fraser. Oh, what a sweetie.
Pretty, look at the eyes.
Nice
He's-
eyes.
Green eyes.
Have any of you had any of the mishaps like the lawyer who had the cat filter on and had to convince the judge that that he's not a cat?
I've had quite a few, given that we do actually conduct mediations online every single day, including weekends. So families do have a different pattern during the weekend versus during the week in terms of whatever is happening. But I wanted to ask you, since you've developed all these strategies with the students online, did you also learn for yourself when they're not actually paying attention and they're just nodding? And I mean, can you tell? Can you see it, or not really? I mean, can you see that I've been on WhatsApp for the last like 20 minutes?
It's so much harder than in a classroom in which
Yeah.
I'm able to be like really stringent about that. So part of it is just like radical acceptance that it's going to happen. They're going to do it. That's going to be part of it. But that is one of the key reasons that I had that students be the one to pick the next student. So that it would encourage people to be on their toes a little bit more. I also had to understand, particularly exactly a year ago when this started, that people were going through something difficult and traumatic. Most of my students were non-Americans, so they were also worried about like what's going to happen to their legal status, and they had family abroad. So a big part of it was just acceptance on my own part that, you know what, there's only so much material we're gonna cover, and if nothing else, if I could find a comfortable and safe platform for people to engage, then I've done my job. And if part of that means being a bit more lax around people's multitasking, then so be it. Now, as time progressed and this became normative, I became a little bit stricter about policing that. But no, I couldn't tell with certainty if people were on. And I also found, like, as all of you who do any kind of teaching and training know, being constantly on is really like both enervating and energizing. And I remember the first time I had to use the share screen feature to show a video that I had on my computer. I will tell you, before class, I made sure there was nothing on my desktop, nothing that could any way be offensive or harmful. I scrubbed it. In hindsight, I thought like the school should give us like the Breaking Bad burner phone version of a computer just for Zooming. So like nothing pops up on the screen. And yet, despite all my efforts for that not to happen, the very first time I shared screen, what happened was this. So what's normally behind me when I'm teaching is a whole array of flip charts and drawings and other stuff. So I used my own camera like early in the morning before class to make sure like everything was in the line of sight, that you could see things, that I had everything handy, that the whole mise en scène was magnifique. And to do that, I took some test pictures in the morning. And I was shirtless in those pictures because it was the summer. It was hot. And like, so for some reason, but I didn't actually take the pictures. For some reason, the image of me, as far as anyone could tell, naked in front of all of my drawings, when I went to share screen, preview opened up, and that image of me standing there with like an insane look in my face, naked in front of my drawings, is what popped up. And even worse, there were like little thumbnail pictures of me wearing costumes underneath it, and that's all. We don't need to talk about that, but that's what the students saw, and then my screen froze. I just got the little spinning like wheel of death, and I just heard this collective like, oh no, from my students. So yeah, like that frozen picture of me that was just there. There was this frozen picture of me shirtless, and for what it's worth, not a flattering picture. And I couldn't make it. I couldn't make it go away. I couldn't stop. So like, I'm like, all I can do now is close my computer and like fake my own death and move to another country. Like that was it. So I shut down my computer, got back online, and I'm like, can I just check in with y'all? What did y'all just see? And we had a conversation about it. They were lovely, and they made jokes about it through the rest of the class, and
You got their attention.
oh, it was yeah.
Got their attention.
Well, I think they were wondering what class they had actually registered for.
Well, yeah, it was. I think my first remark was, so do you want to call human resources or should I? How do we want to play that one out? But
Were you recording because for me here, I have to record the show, or sorry, the show. I have to record the teaching, the lesson, because then they can access it later to review it. Was that being recorded?
Thankfully, no. And I didn't record those classes. And one reason was because, well, in almost any mediation class, it's not unusual for people to share, rather personal and meaningful things to them. And particularly during pandemic times, the students were real, and during our political unrest, there were a lot of emotional moments, and I didn't want students to feel any more scrutinized than they already were. So we kind of made a pact not to record anything.
Joni, I think you wanted to speak.
Yeah, there are a few things. I just wanted to point out that I think the fact that your course was oversubscribed and people were zooming in at crazy hours in the morning and all over the place, I think that speaks to probably their dedication to like really wanting to hear what you had to offer, and that any kind of multitasking would probably be out of necessity for some reason, and not because they were bored or they had to be there, or I get the feeling that they really wanted to be there and really wanted to be paying attention.
I think so too. And I think it had nothing to do with me, or less to do with me than it did with them having human contact with each other and having an opportunity to talk and connect and bond. And this was this one class was happening in the middle of our unrest, so the double whammy of lockdown and people taking to the streets and talking about mediation during a time when the idea of dialogue wasn't the most a popular way of looking to solve problems. And it was so I think it was meaningful that for them to have that space together, and a real honor for me to be able to hold that space.
The other thing too is that when you have a class where you're there together, you have a few minutes before class, you have some minutes after class. At the breaks, you can just kind of chit chat to each other. or pass notes or whatever, it doesn't really mean you're not listening. It's just part of that whole interaction. And I think on Zoom, what I found, certainly at our Jade meetings and things, that the chat is where we can kind of connect with each other on that level and have that little bit of networking, little bit of connecting. But it's hard because we don't want to not be listening to the person who's speaking. But it's one of the adjustments I think we've had to make to keep that social connective part going.
Yeah, absolutely. Finding some simulacrum for that informal time in this weird context, I found was important, and that often meant just some conversation time, people to share what's on their mind. I did have
Warning news.
was one really pleasant thing for me.
Anybody pick up on that one?
Did you do that?
Nice, yes.
Sorry, carry on.
Thought it was
One thing that the students did was they had a final exam on the last day of class where they all had to do a simulated mediation, and they got together the night before that. So after being together for 6 hours with me during the day, they all reconvened, every one of them, across the globe, and had like a 4-hour practice session on their own. And I think part of that was because they were nervous about the exam. I think the other part was exactly what you're speaking to, Joni, which is just, finding time to make those connections.
You mentioned earlier, and I know from my understanding of you, you're a very expressive person. You like to use visuals to communicate a lot of your inside stuff, to put it out. And then you mentioned that when you do the in-person delivery, you actually have those things present in the room. So how did you organize yourself to transition yourself into an online, being such a openly expressive person?
Well, it is true. I do use a lot of visuals and art as a deflection from my crushing social anxiety and self-loathing. They're great props and tools. I'm a visual learner, so I had flip charts set up. I made a point not to turn it into PowerPoint, not to digitize it. I still wanted that kind of tactile feel of it. And one of the things that some of you know is for 4 years, every day I did a drawing. I'm an amateur artist. I did a drawing of some literary, creative, political figure and put a quote of what they said. And I think about 2,000 of these. So what I've been doing during the pandemic, I did this both in class. If an idea would come up that would resonate with a great quote, I would hold it up. And I've actually turned these into stickers. So I've also become an urban vandal during the pandemic, which is to say, so I'll show you one here.
An entrepreneur.
Yeah, can you make this out?
Try again, fail better. And that's by,
Used to be my
who's the person?
That
Sorry.
is Beckett, the Irish writer and
An Irish writer. Oh, perfect for Irene.
Beckett.
Honored. So I have like really
That's
tons of
why.
these are, and I've turned them into stickers. So one of my rituals, kind of aside from teaching, is every morning I would go out on the street and plaster these all over the place in Manhattan. It's been fun because like I've been seeing pictures on social media that people would take of my things. And by the way, I believe that right here, right now, live, I am confessing to a minor crime. Now, my feeling is that since I'm doing it on a Canadian show, that somehow I'm off. That makes no sense. But I found myself in this community of people who put up what they call slaps. The kids call these stickers slaps. And so, I made a make a point of not putting them on people's private property or cars, but only places that are kind of quasi sanctioned for people to put up.
You're in a non-judgmental space. And as in mediation, I want to remind you, everything within this space and the session is confidential.
Right.
Used to.
Excellent. And
Yeah.
although this, Joni, you may remember, you may have seen this because I think you're involved in this Facebook discussion. I put some pictures on Facebook of some of my quote portraits online, and one of my Facebook friends, who was a police officer, not our friend John, someone else, was like, you realize that you've committed a crime, that you have to pay a $300 fine for everyone that you put up, plus the cost of removing them. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm a criminal.
He was punking you?
But a criminal nonetheless.
Was he punking you?
No, she wasn't actually. She was like being serious. She's like, this is, and at that time I wasn't putting up as many inspirational mediator adjacent quotes. I was putting up like some pretty pointed anti-Trump stickers. So I did a whole series of like Trump silhouettes with obnoxious things. That, you know, my most popular one was "Enough of this effing guy already," and
Yeah.
so I think part of it was a response to the politics of it.
I liked your riff on Banksy too, with the balloon.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that was good.
yeah. Waiting for that lawsuit as well from Banksy. Everything else.
I don't think Banksy is going to trouble himself with you.
He's got bigger fish to fry than Heckman. Yeah, I think so.
So did you end up paying the fines, or?
No, I haven't been caught. I mean, I like, the nice thing about pandemic drag is that like we're all masked and anonymous. So okay, so I go under cover of darkness, bandana over my face, hat on, looking like a diminutive bank robber, putting stuff up. I haven't been caught. It's not unusual for like people to stop me and say, "Hey, do you have any extras that I can have?" And I've actually become part of this like weird sticker sharing community. By the way, I can't imagine how helpful this conversation is to our mediation crowd. But anyway, I've been part of this community of people who they exchange stickers. They send you an envelope of their stickers. You send them their stickers. So my whole door, which you can't see from here, is now covered with like urban graffiti stickers. So a little soupçon of a midlife crisis there, becoming an urban graffiti artist at 54 years old.
I see the connection with mediation.
What might that be?
I'll have to get back to you on that.
I think it's community building, and
Yes.
also it's been an interactive process for you too, because people have enhanced your slaps and ripped away certain parts and created new slapettes from your slaps and
by the way, that was the name of my girl band in college, the Slapettes. Pause for uproarious laughter. Another thing you have to do.
Yeah, we'll have to edit that in after.
I'm not,
I'll say that one of the Zoom challenges for me was like, you don't, if people are muted, you're not going to get the oohs or the ahs or the laughter at my hilariousness, whatever it might be, and like that's like that takes some getting used to.
Well, when you're in the room, you're in person and delivering your material, and not your jokes per se, even though that's part of your material. I mean, your class content, your course content.
Yeah.
You can feed off the energy. You can pick up on that energy, and they can pick up on yours. And there's a reciprocity of some form.
Yeah.
How do you find that transitions in any way through Zoom?
It is really, it's different, and you know, everything in life is a trade-off. So like for me, okay, we're not going to get that reciprocal energy or feel it in that same kind of visceral way. But I also don't have to commute anywhere. So, so they're apples and oranges. It's this is a false equivalency, but there are trade-offs that kind of make some of those things a little bit more palatable. It did mean for me being, much more mindful around calling on students, and which I do as a matter of course anyway. Like I always say, you can't hide in my classroom, and on Zoom it's harder. So I just meant calling on people more, but it really did, among other things, like doing the show me the hands reaction to what's going on, or frequently, and also as a way of practice and reflection, I would say something, and I would ask another student, can you just dumb down what I just said? And the response was often, well, like you gave it at a pretty dumb level. I don't know. Let me smarten it up a little bit. But so doing it that way, but it's harder work. It started to feel a bit more natural, but it did make me think of you, Greg, because you do this on a regular basis, where you have a show, you broadcast, you have an audience, and you have to make some, I would imagine, some assumptions that people are responding to what's happening, and have some sense of intuition that the conversation is going in a way that is helpful or instructive to the audience, and if not, kind of move things around.
Well, I correlate a lot of using active listening. When I'm doing the radio gig, usually the person's in the other room. I'm in the control room and they're in the studio. When you have called in, of course, I don't have the benefit of picking up on your physicality. I have to use my listening skills to see about how you're navigating with the conversation, to try to see how to interject and build upon that. And I see, like, when we transition from in-person to Zoom delivery, there's an added level that we need to have as active listening, or even attentive communication, I'll call it, because it's not just listening, it's watching, it's processing those moments, those visuals, to see how they make sense, to see how they quote what might be missing, to then see what to do next.
It requires a whole level of attentiveness, and I find one of the many things that I admire about millennials, and to a greater extent Generation Zs, they're digital natives. Like, this is like they're hardwired to have these conversations. This is how they work. When on one of our episodes together, we talked about my work in Iraq, where because of their living conditions, they communicate mainly through social media, and they use Facebook in a very different way. They use it for kind of life or death purposes and ways to connect. So what can feel unnatural for my generation, or require this adjustment to be more vigilant as a listener, comes much more naturally for the other younger generations. Well, I got to tell you, the Generation Zs, I cannot wait for these folks to become our overlords. They are just...
I have to translate that, though. It's Generation Zs up here, please.
Oh, Generation Z. I like that.
Well, I already have a millennial overlord, over lady, I guess would be. My daughter is a millennial, and I keep asking her for help on stuff, and she pretends she doesn't know how to do what I'm asking her to do. But it's like they come out of the womb knowing how to do this stuff. It's something.
And I remember years ago at one of the mediation conferences here in the States, there was a session on kind of the differences between the different generations, baby boomers, Generation X, and millennials. This was before Generation Z. And there was all this talk about how the millennials are going to have less empathy, and study shows that because they're interfacing with screens rather than people, that this is reducing their ability to empathize. And I'm thinking, well, I reckon that whoever wrote that study was not of that generation, and they couldn't have been more wrong. So in terms of what I see around tolerance, diversity, inclusion, activism, world-changing behaviors, I'm just stunned, and I feel like it feels, like there's still part of it wants to say, these damn kids, when I was your age, I had to type things on a typewriter and change the ribbon. You have no idea how bad it was. No, I think they're absolutely amazing, and going through in this country civil unrest and an insurgence and a pandemic and things that I couldn't have imagined growing up.
They get a bad rap, but I think that their response would be, "Okay, boomer."
Yeah, I love that, and all Generation Xer, but I love the okay boomer response.
So taking on the sort of what we're talking about, I would identify something about diversity. Like when we're dealing in the room through Zoom, and you mentioned about different time zones and people from a different cultural contexts and lived experiences. So transitioning the course content from an in-class delivery obviously would not provide for someone from a different time zone to be part of that course. Now it's opened it up to other people who can access the course content because, if they were willing to get up at the hour that necessitates the start time and they're from on the other side of the world, that's great. So how do you adapt yourself to trying to be consciously aware of the diversity of the people in the room, age-wise, culturally?
Well, it's yeah. I mean, this is something that it's so important that we're mindful of, and my pedagogical philosophy really is that of an inverted classroom. It's their classroom, and despite my monopolizing here in my classroom, it's their time to present their narrative, their stories, and my job to be kind of a gentle shepherd or coach. And be aware, particularly when we're dealing with the added vulnerabilities of time zones, of being in people's homes, that other things might be going on. And it makes me admire my students so much. I have one student who, I'm anonymizing this and changing it as much as possible for confidentiality reasons, but it's a student who, her demeanor in class was that of kind of like a cool, chic, stylish New Yorker. She's from a different country. Her family are very observant Muslims, and that's a side of her that is very different at home than it is at school or at work. So her, the code switching there is really important. And suddenly we're in her home where, we're seeing her wearing a hijab for the first time, being in an environment where she was suddenly humbled in a way by showing this very different side of her. And it was beautiful because, if nothing else in mediation, what we want to do is help people see each other more three-dimensionally. And this became an opportunity for that. So for me, what do I do? A lot of it is when do I kind of let go and let the plane fly itself? And that was one of those things. And in that case, the student chose to say, okay, I know that I look different. I know things look different. Here's what's going on with me. And the other students were applauding her. She felt tremendously empowered and less self-conscious around it. And what I did was nothing.
Well, wouldn't I say back to you that you did do something by providing a space, creating the conditions that she felt comfortable to be able to show who she really is?
Yeah, or another facet of who she is, because you
Yeah.
know we contain multitudes.
Yeah, right. We have multi-dimensional, right? For sure.
Okay, I was just going to say, and what a good mediator does is get out of the way. And that's not doing nothing. It's consciously getting out of the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's going on between people.
I really was going to say absolutely the same what Joni had said. I believe it is their process, and if we can find the way to create the space where they feel comfortable. I mean, I've seen a lot of freedoms that people have taken because of Zoom. So not only that we have been able to connect with families where there was a geographical distance that otherwise there's no way we could have connected with. So we are working, mainly in person. We would be working in the GTA area, Toronto area. However, we have had actually families who are now, one parent is in Canada, one parent is in US. We've had families where one parent is in Canada, one parent is in Nicaragua. So we have had and they were able to finalize all of their family affairs that they needed to finalize for many purposes, for whatever, for support, for moving, for whatever the case may be, for children starting school in a different province or a different community period, or a different country, like the Nicaragua family. So this has allowed for that type of mechanism where there's no way we would have had this. I don't like to call it sped up, but it met the people where they were. It met them where they're at, and it really provided them with finding a way, a space, still given the conditions and the geographical distance, to get this done. So it's really cool. And another guy, actually, I really like that. And talking about freedoms, not just geographically, but he was so edgy during the mediation, and it was a mediation that it was in separate rooms. So the mom was in one room, the dad was in the room, and that was okay because they both felt that that's the most productive that they can go. I generally like to have them all facing each other if possible, but there are the odd cases. And they're not odd for it's just they're rare, but they do happen, and that's okay if that's what they want to do. But a gentleman, he was so fidgety during the mediation, and at some point he realizes, I'm in my home, I'm not here in person with any of you, and he said, is it okay if I light a cigarette? Is it okay if I smoke?
Come on, if I smoke.
and you know what? I have to say, it almost took us. We do co-mediation, so I work with my colleague Eva. So you almost we paused, because it's such a rare question you get. You never get this question anymore in this type of meetings, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
interesting, because I think one of the things that I think might be harder in mediation is some of those things, like the fidgety behaviors, the nonverbal leakage that we can be attuned to, since people are more likely watching themselves than they are other people on Zoom. They can be more likely to self-police what they're doing. So picking up on some of those things, I find to be harder. I love that. So did you
I think it was maybe, and I agree with you, it is harder. It's just I find that the co-mediation model that we have, so Eva and I work together, or Marty and I work together as co-mediators on this. So really there's always a pair of eyes, not just, so if I'm looking at you or the family, the parents, whomever it is, that's okay, because my co-mediator is looking for something else, is also compensating in a way and complementing what I cannot see because I'm looking in this little hole that is not really anybody but just a hole, a black hole.
Right.
so, so it works really well. But I do have to say, after that little quick pause, I think we were aligned. This is definitely the first time that we can say, sure, go ahead, have your cigarette, have your smoke. And things have gone so much better after. I think every mediation began with him having a cigarette, and things were calm.
And let's take that to its logical extension. So if it works for him, it'll work for others. So we may encourage people to light up. Now, this may take some years off of their lives, but they may resolve their disputes. So, it kind of balances out. And I'm also kind of thinking now, if one person gets the smoke, then maybe everyone in the room should have to light up, whether they smoke or not. So, so it's kind of like when my Aunt Helen wanted to learn how to smoke from my grandfather. I said, all right, I'm going to teach you how to smoke. Here's what you do. You sit here and you smoke an entire pack of cigarettes, one after the other, down to the end. And of course, you never smoked again afterwards because that was such a miserable experience. So where I'm going with this is chain smoking during mediation.
Is that a new approach?
Or
New approach.
Is it a new approach that you're promoting?
I'm
But
kind of workshopping it right now, but
Yeah.
I have to give credit to Laura for this one.
Well, going on approaches, and I know we're approaching close to the end time for tonight. There was a concept that we talked about earlier. You talked here, maybe possibility of chain smoking mediation. I presented about the naked mediation thing. What comes to mind for you, Brad?
Oh, yeah. Naked mediation. Well,
Yeah.
I'm still traumatized by my naked Zoom class. So I don't know. Naked.
Out of your head.
I don't know. I gotta tell you, I remember being in California for a retreat, and my boss at the time said, "Hey, let's all go to my place. We'll all go into the hot tub together." And I'm thinking, this is crazy. I'm not going to get nearly naked with my colleagues and go into a hot tub, but that's California. That's how they roll. That's how they do their thing. So I don't know.
Well, I know you're lost for words. It's okay because I
In
just
the hot tub.
presented this to you in the moment. It's something that's underneath Joni in terms of that. That's where it really comes from for this conversation. Joni? Nothing to say?
Well,
Blaming somebody else.
just say that it kind of hitches onto the idea you said about the smoking during a mediation, is that if you're going to do naked mediation, and there are people who do naked mediation, everyone has to be naked. And so this is a thing for people who aren't naturalists or nudists. They feel most comfortable without their clothes. And clothes, give messages, right? And when you're in a situation that's not your own home with your cigarettes nearby and you're not hurting anyone or offending anyone by smoking, that gives you a certain amount of freedom to take comfort in your usual comfort activities, right? So when people who feel more comfortable, more at ease, naked, for them to have a mediator or co-mediators who also feel very comfortable naked, and the other party involved also feels comfortable naked.
Yeah.
There's a freedom in that. And I can tell you from my own experience that in California was where I first got naked with other people at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur. And I had no idea that I was going to end up naked in a hot spring pool with 28 strangers. But that is what happened. And, by the third day, you wonder how you never got naked with strangers before. It seems like such a great thing. So it's interesting what you can learn from these different ideas about how to do things, and how you might think, I could never, not in a million years, could I do that. You might be surprised.
Never thought I'd be able to do stuff on Zoom as we are. So maybe that's the next step. And I think the way you're expressing it, Joni, I think if everyone, including the mediators, like that's their comfort level, I think that's great. And as I'm hearing this, I'm like finding like the need to like button up even more. I'm thinking like, I can think of very few instances in which I want to be. What are you holding up, Laura? What is that?
Just coming up. Just
It's a message.
you would not know whether I'm clothed or not.
She's trying to communicate to us.
Is that it? Yeah.
It's kind of the, you know.
Well, it's, as you know, I've been doing daily figure art drawing. So after drawing people's heads for 4 years, I'm now doing nude figure drawings that I post every day. And it's kind of kicked up a little bit of a brouhaha on the interwebs and Facebook. Like I got some really, as you know, Joni, some really strong reactions for my depictions of people, as well as some really well appreciated humor about people's how you say junk.
Well,
Yes.
isn't it more about the positioning? I mean, we can correlate it to mediation. People come in with positions. You have what you're presenting are positions, and some may see the position from a different point of view, per se.
Let me just applaud you on your attempt to reel this back into some semblance of a mediation discussion. So kudos to you on that. Yes, so we are talking. We can talk about positions and interests for sure.
We have to go soon. Is there something you can present to us visually just before we sort of say see you soon again? Do you have some kind of visual?
Where this last conversation went, I'm not exactly sure where you're going with that, Greg.
Well, where do you want it? I'll put it back to you. Where do you want to take it?
Well, I'm not getting naked anytime soon. If that's
No, we're not going there.
I
Yeah.
can, but I have been just.
You have a graphic of one of your illustrations?
One of my daily drawings.
Yeah.
Again, it's really not connected to mediation. It's more of a meditative process of me just drawing human form as a way to be in touch with myself. And
I would say that, my history in community mediation was providing a means for people and, helping them to create the ways that they felt they could self-express. So if music was a way, or if they were doing drawings and that communicated how they were feeling, then that was an opportunity for them to express themselves. So I see this in light.
excellent. So let me see if I have a relatively unoffensive. Oh, here's one that doesn't have any private parts showing. I don't know if you can.
But the red hand is a motif.
Yeah, it is for whatever reason, and in developing my own kind of visual language of these, and I do them every day. That I always have a red hand in them. I don't know exactly why, other than there's a Nick Cave song, "Red Right Hand." Maybe
There's
that's
symbolism there. That's something to unpack. Yeah.
Yeah, and when there's a red hand and a red breast, and the rest, there's no red anywhere else, but that really pops out too. I go very deep with your nude paintings.
Dude, you created like backstories on these characters, and like for me, it's like which marker is closest to me. That's the one I'm going to use.
Your soul coming through. That's your subconscious coming through and taking that marker and putting it where your soul wants it to be. And I just want you to know that I can see it, right?
It's just random what I'm hearing, Brad. It's random. It's improvised. You're in the moment, like you said. You take the marker that's closest to you, and then you put together whatever is in your head, you're feeling, and that's how you present whatever. It's rather than being, okay, I'm going to create this drawing this way before you start it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we could go on, and I want to be respectful that we can't. And I want to say thank you very much for doing this way with us for the first time. And it adds another dimension, like Zoom does, with the visual in addition to the audio. Anything in closing you want to share?
Thank you for letting me see you all.
Brad, anything for you want to share?
Oh, for me, I thought you were tossing it out to the group. No,
First you.
Just thanks again for letting me be part of this beautiful space that you've created, and it's been fun doing this visually, and thanks to Lynn C and Ben and Christiana and
2 phone numbers.
Parts Unknown.
Phone numbers, yeah.
One of them is Irene.
Irish. You can call me Irish.
So there's a face. There's Lynn.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So everyone's connected in some way from a history of us here. And so it's great to provide a space for you to reach out to them and connect with them, because you have such value in terms of what you're all about, and we value you for all of that. And I would encourage an opportunity to connect with you again. I don't know if it'll be on the radio or through the visual. Never know. Life is always a constant change.
I want to say how special this is for me because, Brad, like, you're part of my everyday life, really, through Facebook and on a visual level with your art and all the back and forth and the kibitzing and all this stuff. But you really are a part of my daily life. And it's, especially during the pandemic, that's a really strong connection. And it's just so wonderful to be almost face to face in the same room with you again.
Well, it's very mutual, Joni. Thank you, and to all of my Canadian family.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Anything, Laura, you want to?
I think I think you could have gone on for longer, especially on the last 2 topics. So thank you for bringing those up at the end, Greg, the naked mediation and the smoking. But that's fine. Chain smoking will be the next show that we'll have. So, Brad, always a pleasure. It was really nice to have you here tonight, and I thank everybody for being here. And hopefully we'll do a next program on one of those topics that have been brainstormed quasi during this this show tonight.
And I just want to bring to light too that we've said this before. Of the 4 who are visual or visible, I should say, the common theme amongst all 4 are that we all have bookcases within.
Right. Again, mine is actually just wallpaper that looks like books.
Look, don't just go with the flow. It's our reality.
Right. Yes, I read things. Yes.
Mine is real. Mine is real.
Okay, mine's real too. Yeah. All right, so those Laura's.
Right.
So thanks everyone. So if everyone we'll see you next week. Next week, actually, one of the persons here tonight is going to be with me, and he's in the audience right now. That's Ben.
Oh.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to Ben.
So we'll have a conversation.
Excellent.
Yeah. So thanks for coming, everyone, and we'll see you soonish.
All right. Good night.
Goodbye. Good night.